So I did a video a little while back on a chick that we had that was just in very bad condition. And what I decided to do, instead of putting it down, it had paralysis in its legs, it had diarrhea, it was losing its feathers, is I decided to put it on this vitamin supplement right here. It's called Liquid B12 plus vitamin K, which vitamin K is a blood thickener. I didn't know that. One of our commenters told me that. But she's been on it now for about a month. She's been separated from her other birds because as a weaker bird, I didn't want her to get too caught up in the pecking order. But I was thinking, you know, today might be a good day to kind of let her out and see how she's doing. So let's see how she does here. You being bashful? She's still a little weak on her feet, but she's definitely walking around. Get her some food and water. Now the problem is these stronger birds will come in and peck at her and give her a hard time. Hey! Go. So, you guys just got your first-hand look at a little terror right here. You want some? You gotta let me pet you. So she's getting a lot stronger. She's much better than she was. The last time I let her out, she couldn't hold her own, or he, whatever it is. And this time, they really, they were really going at it over the food. She just needs time to be able to, it just needs time to be able to go out and explore and find some safe zones. You know, the food is always going to be an issue. These guys love fighting over food. I'm going to let them kind of keep to their own spaces for now. But I'm pretty excited about the results so far. I mean, obviously it's a completely different bird than what we had before. So if you run into this issue, the B12 with vitamin K supplement is absolutely beneficial for them. It can really turn it around. He was pretty late in the game and was in pretty bad condition, so it's taken a little longer on the recovery than what I would have liked, but I am seeing great results and the bird is doing fantastic. I'm unfortunately going to have to probably keep it bottled up for a little bit until it's a lot stronger and can hold its own. Its siblings, which that one that was fighting with it is a sibling, they're much more, they're a lot stronger birds, and I don't want anybody hurting the other one. Why don't you let me pet you? I'm not gonna hurt you. So yeah, if you want to see that video, I'll put a link up there, but definitely massive improvement. Works extremely well. So up here I have some baby chicks with their mama. They always try and come out when I open this up, so I gotta trick them. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and supplement their water so that we don't have this issue again. That way they're getting the vitamins early on and I don't have an issue that goes too far like that last one did. These guys are getting bigger. They go through their food and water on a daily. hopefully, we'll have more chicks go broody here. All these chicks went broody in the middle of winter this year, which is extremely odd. But we've had a pretty good survival rate with the chicks. There was one situation where we had a freeze and the mother had left the eggs with 3 small chicks, and one of the chicks died. I'm not sure if she killed it or if it just died naturally, but the rest of the eggs, obviously they stopped the incubation process. They didn't survive. So we tried to put her back on the eggs and see what happened. We moved them inside the house for a little bit, but now she's just out here with her 2 little ones. We had a flock of 3, one with the messed up chicken, and then we had a flock of 2. And then if they go broody again, I'll do an update on that. But raising chickens like this and having them just go broody and have more chickens so you can have a constant supply of chickens really isn't that big of a deal. It's actually pretty easy to do, and they take care of themselves extremely well. I hate that we had to separate that one to bring it up to health, because normally the flocks will stick together and protect each other from the other birds. But if I can figure out a way to integrate that bird back in once she's strong enough, then I think that we'll be fine. Now, not all of these are going to be hens. There are going to be some roosters mixed in when you're doing it this way, and that's when you have to figure out a way to manage your flock and get rid of the extra roosters. And somebody asked me what you do with roosters like that. If they're a full-bred rooster, meaning that they're of a particular breed, you can usually sell them and people will want them and buy them. But roosters that are a mixed breed of chicken, there's not a whole lot of places that want them, because too many roosters cause a problem. You're going to end up with cockfights and other things going on. So what we will normally do is just raise them until they become a problem. They usually won't fight. They're not going to pick a fight with our big rooster for quite some time. But once they get to that size where they start picking on each other, then we'll try and adjust and see what happens. But ultimately, as human beings, we have changed the environment quite a bit to where there's not as many natural predators. Of course, my chickens would argue with me on that. And so it's, part of herd management, part of flock management, part of managing animals is, managing the life expectancy that would Mother Nature would have otherwise naturally taken care of. So it's not necessarily a bad thing if I say, well, when the rooster gets too big and it starts to fight with the other rooster, we'll cull it and have stew. I mean, that's a natural progression that there's not anything wrong with. But obviously with our hens, we try and keep them as long as we can because we get eggs. And so you get a lot more production out of an animal like a hen, where you can constantly have eggs. Well, this egg's been damaged. She must have put her claw in that one. You have a lot more production out of the animal with eggs, with the animal alive. So, we keep them around as long as we can. But then the life expectancy of a hen is not, 30 years or anything like that. And so eventually they reach a point where they stop laying. And when they stop laying, that's a good sign that, they're on a different cycle of life, and that would be a good time to go ahead and cull them, so that they're not suffering through consequences of Mother Nature not handling them on their own. So that's how we handle our eggs. That's how I think about it. We like to let them live as long as possible. We all are told we need fatty meat for it to taste good, or if we let a chicken get too old, it's gonna be too lean. We cook a lot of our stuff in a slow cooker anyway, which tenderizes a lot of things. And naturally speaking, as human beings, meat is essential for us. There are micronutrients in meat that you can't get in anything else unless it's synthetic. And that's kind of a big deal right now. It's a bipartisan deal that they're trying to fully label synthetic vitamins and synthetic foods that mimic meat, to let people know that it's not the same thing. Your body's not going to digest it and pull those nutrients the same way. And that's important because, you know, there are a lot of different things. I'll do a completely different video on it. The point is that we are meat eaters, but we're supposed to be eating leaner meat. And so when you look at some of these studies that show, oh, meat's bad for you, it's mainly because in modern society, we tend to eat young meat. We tend to eat the offspring of things because it's fattier, it's you know, juicier, and that's what our taste buds have adapted to. But it's not as healthy for us. We do better with the older, leaner meat. So letting your chickens live to a rightful old age before you cull them, there's nothing wrong with that. And you can still have a good meal afterwards. It's just you don't have to, you know, you don't have to have these fast growth chickens that you cull every year or within 6 months of them being born. That's not actually a natural way of life, and that type of meat is not actually is good for you. And so all of those things, you know, I'll do a completely different video on this stuff. You know, there's been a lot of extremities out there over the past year when it comes to livestock, and you know, there's some truth to it, but for the most part, you know, there's a lot of misinformation as well, and that misinformation could be extremely dangerous to the health of people, especially child development and things like that. So I'll do a different video on that. Sorry, I went into a little bit of a tangent there, but I've had people ask us, well, what do you do with the extra roosters? Well, you let them live for a bit and then you cull them. And I've had people ask, well, you know, do you eat your chickens? Well, we haven't culled any of ours because they haven't been around long enough yet. But there's going to be a point in which they're no longer producing eggs, which means that their life cycle is changing. And at that point in time, we probably will cull them because we're not allowing our chickens to be out all night long where a coyote or something would normally pluck off the less healthy animals. It's like when I did my last video on the chicken there that had paralysis in the legs, you have to, as a manager of these animals, as somebody who's a caretaker for them, you have to kind of think through these things and say, you know, am I prolonging something by allowing something to just kind of continue to live until it naturally dies? And what kind of abuse is that actually putting the animal through? A good example is we had a really old horse who lived well into his 30s, probably was going on 40, and we just really loved the animal. We didn't want to put him down. We loved him. He was such a great horse, such just an amazing animal. Finally, you know, the vet kind of said to us, you know, look, when this animal goes, it's going to be worse than it would have been natural. Because he's being taken care of by human caretakers, he hasn't been taken out at a younger age, at a normal age for a horse, because of natural circumstances. Instead, you know, the human caretaking of the animal has allowed it to live for a longer age, and you know, the issues that it now is going to face would be more horrific than the natural forcings. And so that's when we decided to go ahead and have the horse put down, and we recycled him. We had him, we donated him to a large cat rescue so that he could be food for other animals. That's kind of something that people don't realize. There is, you know, a certain level of animal welfare that can be improved upon dramatically in the agricultural industry, but then there's also a certain part of just being a good caretaker and management of animals, herds and flocks and things like that have to be done because it's not something that can naturally be done anymore. You know, I love bison. I watched a video, Silencing the Thunder, and they were talking about how the bison should just be able to roam all over the place. But the reality is that with the population, you know, that we have today, and the lack of predators that we have today, if that were to happen, you know, I guess you could put in a hunting management program like we do with other animals, wildlife. But you really have to take into consideration all the factors there. This isn't, you know, what it was untouched by man thousands of years ago. This is a modern day society. We have cars on roads. People are traveling everywhere. There's interaction with wildlife. And so if we want to be able to keep the biodiversity, agriculture is an amazing way to maintain biodiversity in a safe environment. We have brought back a lot of wildlife programs that have been extremely successful, but then there are things like, the red wolves in North Carolina. Trying to bring those predators back in was extremely unsuccessful. So life changes. It's not like, people are bad people when they raise livestock, but they're actually extremely good people. They're shepherds, they're caretakers, and they're doing the world a service by managing that biodiversity on their lands. And those who take a holistic farming approach, who use the wildlife and create habitats for the wildlife to help manage what they're managing, are doing even more to help integrate wildlife with, a modern society, a modern way of living. I actually think, in my opinion, that over the next decade, the consumer is going to push the livestock industry into, humane management. I think that people are going to start to see the importance of biodiversity and the importance of, the micronutrients in meat other than protein. Everybody's focused on the protein, and that's very minimal. Although it does take a lot more plant protein to feed a person than animal protein, and takes a lot more resources to create, and we need to try and figure out with our population size how to minimize our resources, not expand them. I think that people are going to start, anytime we go through changes like this, where people start to kind of wake up to things and pay attention to things, what I think is going to end up happening is that we see a shift in consumerism that pushes the agricultural livestock industry into a more humane set of practices. And so for those of you who are small farmers who are raising livestock and you're not into the factory farming, there is an extremely advantageous marketing role for you into the next decade that you can take advantage of. Right now, it's probably 10% of people buying meat are actually focus on where the meat comes from, how humanely it was raised, how humanely it was processed. It's not a very large number, believe it or not. They're very outspoken, so it seems like a large number. But I think over the next decade, 50% of the consumer base is probably going to start looking more closely at the humane practices of livestock. That is going to shift dramatically how the industry operates. And so those who are taking the time to set up their properties to implement humane practices can really benefit from that market shift. They can really position themselves. Ultimately, what will happen is that, the consumer will be willing, those people will be willing to pay more for that product. I think it will actually become a trend, a stronger trend over the next 10 years than some of the, fake meat trends. I actually agree with some analysts with the fake meat trends that a lot of those will end up going into animal feed and dog food and things like that, because as we learn more about synthetic foods, we learn more about the unnutritious quality of them. Yes, they might be plant-based, and that's a key word, is they're based on plants. But then they've gone through labs and a fabrication process. To give you an idea, plastic was once a natural resource. And so when you talk about synthetic foods and you talk about the processing, yes, they're all natural ingredients, but it's how they've been put together and manipulated and grown through labs or fermented through labs to try and mimic some of the nutritional qualities of another natural product. And what dietitians are finding is that the qualities in the natural product are properly digested, whereas the products that are the qualities that are in some of those synthetics are just not, you don't get as much of the nutrients out of them. So they might be similar. Niacin might be called niacin in both things, but one is more of a chemical, whereas the other one is a natural nutrient that your body absorbs much better. And same goes with, our bodies react differently between plant proteins and animal proteins as well. They're not all the same. They're all proteins, but they're all slightly different. So as we get into some of these plant-based things that are then highly processed into what they call synthetic foods. And you'll find that even some of the big investors in these companies call them synthetic foods. They don't call them plant-based foods. The marketing materials on the foods call them plant-based, but the actual investors, people putting their money behind it, when they talk to other people, they say synthetic, and they're doing that partly for liability reasons. That trend, I think, moving in that direction will eventually kind of fade off, but what it's going to do is it's going to inspire a completely different movement in the agricultural industry. And I think that the more people see that coming, and the more producers we have really start to pay attention to, humane treatment and humane raising of animals, they're going to be the benefactors of that transition. They're going to be the benefactors of that switch. The push for these synthetic foods is really putting things out there, putting in misinformation campaigns out there to encourage people to try their product. It's all a game to make more money. There's actually ETFs now designed around these synthetic foods. There's more money being made off of the IPOs of those companies, which I call short-term quick money. These people are into the businesses to build them up and then get out, and they're willing to cause whatever damage along the way to make the money that they can. And I'm going to do a different video on the North Carolina nuisance laws and how a lot of the people involved in those lawsuits against the farms are people from out of the state, people that are behind organizations, and they're spearheaded by investors in these synthetic foods. And so it's all just a disruption campaign, but I think that disruption campaign and that the information that they keep throwing out there, people, even if it is misleading, is going to lead the consumer's mindset into a direction of wanting that humane product. Anyway, enough of that tangent. I'm going to throw this egg because she cracked it with her claw and go ahead and feed these chicks because they're squawking at me.